Hi, my name is Megan, and this is Everything Lit. And today, we have a vino. So if you hear some crinkling, this little boy is annoyed at me. All right, welcome to my May wrap-up. I'm going to talk about the 11 books I finished in May. That's the month. Technically, I finished 12 because I did finish Belladonna at the very beginning of the month, but I included that in my April wrap-up because I literally finished it on like the 1st and I hadn't filmed yet. So first, I read Fearless 14 by Janet Evanovich. If you couldn't tell by the title, this is the 14th book in a series. I'm not gonna lie, I don't remember much about the plot specifics, but this is the 14th in a series following bounty hunter Stephanie Plum. It's very comedic. It doesn't take itself seriously. It involves Stephanie learning how to be a bounty hunter because she just needs the money and getting involved in this world with a lot of threats, a lot of danger. She has a guy that she's on again, off again with, and they really like each other. And then there is a guy who she flirts with. I think at this point, if you like comedic romantic thrillers, you could probably start the series and enjoy it. Kind of feel like at this point, like you're grandfathered in. No one is starting the Stephanie Plum series, right? Maybe they are. I don't know. I guess I'm technically kind of new. I've been reading it for like a year or two now. I gave Fearless 14 4 stars. Honestly, you could bump it down to a 3 because I don't really remember it, but clearly at the time I enjoyed it. I read If the Shoe Fits by Julie Murphy. This is the first in Disney's Meant to Be series. So these are classic Disney stories retold as adult romances. This one is a retelling of Cinderella, where a plus-sized girl goes on a bachelor-esque show called Before Midnight. It was cute, but I'm not gonna lie, one, it's a closed-door romance, so there are no sex scenes. It did get like steamy at one point, but that's it. I really liked how the Cinderella myth was retold and how our main character Cindy, her like love of shoes, made some interesting good statements. It involves the fashion industry and Cindy wants to get into fashion, and I liked that the relationship between the stepmom and stepsisters was not, they were not the villains really. So that was all really nice. The romance was okay. I did like our main characters, but it felt a little juvenile, and I think I do prefer Julie Murphy in the YA middle grade sphere. And like, yes, this is a Disney book. This is for a specific like series imprint that they're doing. So maybe there were constrictions on her that made this feel a little young. But I also just think, you know, this was her like adult debut. And I don't know if she was ready for that. Hot take. I love this author. I enjoyed this book, but I gave it 4 stars. I read Winter Soldier Cold Front by Mackenzie Lee. I was so stoked to find this book. It just came out in February. This follows Bucky Barnes. I will say, if you're thinking of Marvel Cinematic Universe Bucky, it's not quite that Bucky. This is more comics Bucky, where he's 16. He's not like friends with Steve. He joins Captain America later, but this follows Bucky being enlisted or enlisting in the army, becoming part of this special ops program where young people go undercover as like college students to be spies for the government. So we are following 2 timelines in this, one in 1941. If you've seen the first Captain America movie, this Bucky gives Steve vibes, right? He wants to help, he wants to do his part, he wants to be part of the fighting. We follow a 1954 storyline where the Winter Soldier is with their handler and they are figuring out a plot against the Red Room and the people controlling the Winter Soldier. I did enjoy this. I liked getting a different point of view on Bucky. Bucky is one of my favorite characters, potentially of all time. So that was really good. I think the plot was well done. This had emotional weight to me. It was heartbreaking. to see these two storylines play out side by side. Some of the drawbacks for me were that this didn't really fit in any Marvel canon that I really know. It brought in, you know, outside characters that we don't know. I thought the female character wasn't as well developed as I wanted her to be. And weirdly enough, I preferred the 1954 storyline to the 1941 storyline. And I feel like the 1941 storyline was put in here to like establish that this is not the Marvel Cinematic Universe Bucky. And the plots did tie together, but it felt more like the 1954 storyline was where we were meant to be, and the other one was just kind of there. I would absolutely read a sequel if Mackenzie Lee was tasked with a sequel to follow Bucky. More of his time as the Winter Soldier, more of his time with Steve and the crew, whatever. I'm down to read it. I gave this 4 stars. It was really good, but it wasn't my perfect Bucky read. And then I went on like a thriller binge. I read The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead, and this book was brutal. It gave me the ick, but like in a good way. Like I was supposed to be given the ick. She meant to give you the ick. This is about a woman who finds out that one of her friends from college has died, and they haven't spoken in years, but now she feels compelled to figure out why her friend died, because it seems like it's a suicide, but she feels like her friend wouldn't have done that. One of the people from her past also thinks that it was murder. And so she gets pulled back into this world of like underground sex rings and weird cults, and it's a ride. It's a trip. I really liked it. I think Ashley Winstead really went there. There was no tempering of these characters, right? They were raw and they were angry and they felt things, and it was so good. It was such a good thriller. There were turns that I didn't see coming, but then once you get there, you're like, oh my gosh, of course. I really liked the main character, but the discussion of women's sexuality and women as sexual objects and how that really messes with your mind, it was brutal. It was super interesting. I would absolutely read this book again. I haven't bought it yet because I read it through my library, but I think this is one that I'm gonna go buy. I'm gonna go buy the paperback. So I gave this 5 stars. Amazing. And then I took a quick detour and read Plum Spooky by Janet Ivanovich. This is a Between the Numbers Stephanie Plum novel. And usually these novels focus on a holiday. There's, a Valentine's one, a St. Patrick's Day one. This one took place over Halloween. And this like magical entity named Diesel pops into Stephanie's life and uses some of her bounty hunter prowess to help him find like supernatural entities. It's kind of weird, it's kind of kooky. I don't love these Between the Numbers novels, and I don't really remember this one either. So maybe I should stop reading these if I just don't remember them. But they're just like enjoyable in the moment, I can finish one in like 2 days listening at work. I think this is the last Between the Numbers novel, and I'm not mad about it. So I gave that 3 stars. It was fine. I don't remember it. And then I read The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. This is a thriller. It is a Jane Eyre retelling. I really enjoyed it. This was part of my try chapter video where it almost got me. I read 2 chapters because they were so quick, but I wanted something light and fluffy, and this is not exactly light and fluffy. It is a thriller. It does deal with heavy topics. So our main character, Jane, is a dog walker in a upscale neighborhood, and one day she bumps into Eddie, recently widowed, and they hit it off and start dating, and Jane has some secrets and Eddie has some secrets, and those come out over the course of the book. I thought this was a really interesting retelling. I really liked how the characters were used. I liked the different storylines happening because we kind of get Jane's point of view, and then we get kind of a before point of view. What I will say, as much as I love Jane Eyre and I liked the twists, I thought there were some things that were added just for a little bit of like spice. Like in the first couple chapters, we learn that Jane like steals things, but that doesn't really go anywhere. it's just kind of a like quirky character trait. I mean, maybe it could be considered a flaw, but I felt like that wasn't utilized. It just kind of is a thing. I feel like for as short, relatively short as this is, it still went on like a little long, and there's like a question about Jane's past and like what she did in the past and what she's running from, and I feel like that was drawn out a little long. Like you kind of knew what she'd done by the time it was revealed, so it wasn't like, oh my god, I can't believe that happened. It was just kind of like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I think there was some issues with the tension in here, but I did really like it overall. I really enjoyed the ending, and my version has like an alternate ending that was also fun. So that was fun to see. Enjoyed it. I gave this 4 stars. I think it's a fun, interesting retelling. I don't actually know if it could stand on its own. If you haven't read Jane Eyre, it probably can, but I love Jane Eyre so much, I immediately was putting the pieces together. And then for the Books and Lala Besties Book Club, I read Still Watch by Mary Higgins Clark. This is an older book. It is a thriller, so it was really interesting to read 2 thrillers, one from 2023, one from 2021, and then this from 1985 to kind of compare them. And this follows Pat Traymore, a journalist who does documentaries, and she has this like secret mystery in her past. No one in her life knows about it except her aunt and uncle, and she is trying to figure out what really happened to her parents. They were part of this like murder suicide that was never really like solved. There were still a lot of mysteries around it and like how it happened. And then she moves to Washington, D.C., back into the house where this horrible thing happened to try and like trigger her brain, make her remember, because she was like 3 or 4 and was injured in this kerfuffle. Also, while making a documentary about a female senator who is in line to become the next vice president because the current vice president is like sickly. This has a couple different plots happening in it. It's multiple points of view. There's a lot of like sexism. Now it's called out, like the men are just kind of gross in this, and the main romance, that man is like 45 and she's like 30. There's like a big age gap, which I also thought was a little, didn't love that. There was so much fat phobia in this book, like a triggering amount. Like the senator, that it's like a secret that her mom was like a cook for this rich family. This photo comes out, and the reaction of that character to like the embarrassment of like being seen with her mother, and like the way that her mother was described, even by a character who like called out the fat phobia and said like, this is really, your behavior is disgusting. Just the descriptions were not nice. They were not nice. And I have read a lot of other Mary Higgins Clark books, but I was like 12 or 13, so I can't really compare it to her current stuff or see how well, like how her writing has progressed, how anything has changed. It was super interesting to read this book set in 1985. The main character at one point, like, people just have her address and her phone number. Like, at her previous job, she was like, yeah, if someone calls in inquiring about me, like, give them my address. It's like, people are too paranoid nowadays. That would never happen. I would never tell my previous job, even if I'm a journalist and I want people to contact me, okay, fine, give them my phone number. But I'm not giving you my address so you can come to my house, which is part of this, because now that Pat is working on this documentary about the senator, she's getting threats that like, oh, this should never see the light of day and this person doesn't need a documentary about them. So it is kind of ominous. It is kind of tense. There's a plot line that comes in about the middle of the book that I just didn't understand why we were getting that. It was just a little messy. There was a lot going on. It was fine. I gave it 3 stars. Then I got away from the thrillers and read a romance. It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I finally got to this book after like 2 years of owning it and waiting to read it until summer. Finally did it, and it was okay. So this is about a girl who throws this massive party. The police are involved. There are fireworks at a hotel. So this giant party jeopardizes her stepfather's business, and he cuts her off and sends her to her father's hometown. Her father passed away when she was little. He was a fisherman. So her stepfather and her mother decide, you know what, you're gonna go stay in this small town, learn the value of the dollar and hard work and whatever. And while our main character, Piper, is there, she meets a hunky fisherman, and they have this sort of grumpy sunshine dynamic, and it is said to be inspired by Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek. I liked the character development. I liked Piper and how she grew and how her self-image grew and changed, and some of the discussions about these freaking sirens. I like the discussions about like what it means to be a party girl, and liking fashion or being a girly girl isn't shallow. Like, you can still have depth and still be kind. I liked that. And I liked the male character. I liked their romance. I thought it was cute. It was steamy. Here's the thing. I have the sequel to this book, Hook, Line, and Sinker. I had to go read it. So I do own the sequel to this. I will probably read it because I did like Piper's sister and Fox, and that they're in the second romance. So I will read that one. But I do have one other Tessa Bailey book. I kind of think once I read the ones I own, I'm not going to pick up her other books unless they really call to me. They're really, an interesting plot or something, because there's this thing Tessa Bailey does, and this is the second book I've read by her. And in both of those books, not only did I notice it, but I noticed it in a bad way, where it stuck out to me and it pulled me out of the story and made me kind of like roll my eyes. And that is the descriptions. And I did DNF a series because it was doing this too much, and that is his big masculine hands, her delicate feminine fingers, her tiny little waist, and his big strong everything. Like, it just became too much. It was too much. Like, I get wanting to establish, like, oh yeah, he's a fisherman and he's like jacked and whatever. But, in the sex scenes, it would be like, he tossed her around and she was tiny and he's so big in every way. And I was just like, can we not? Like, I'm over this. It's such a bummer because I really do like a lot of Tessa Bailey's writing, and I do think that her smutty scenes are good for the most part. But there's such a tone shift sometimes between how these characters are acting and then just like bam, sex scene. And I just, with the masculine feminine descriptions, it's just it's so heteronormative, heterosexual. Like, even if there are little mentions of queerness, the descriptions of these characters it's just so hetero, and I can't do it anymore. Is that weird to say? I did give it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I liked it. But some of those descriptions, I was really over it. And then I read the absolute standout of the month, Where You Can Find Me by Sherry Joseph. This book, oh my gosh. So I've been putting this off for years. I bought it, wanted to read it, and just hadn't. And the drawbacks, it was really slow. It is a very tall, it's kind of a dense book, but it was so good. I literally, I powered through the last 80 pages because I could not stop. In fact, I say I could not stop, and then at work I literally had to stop reading it because the tension was too high in the scene, and I thought I was gonna cry, and I couldn't do that at work. I didn't have the space and time to experience what was happening, so I had to stop reading for a little while and wait until I was home. This follows a family. Their 11-year-old son was kidnapped, and then he is recovered at the age of 14 and returned to his family. And so the story starts with him being returned to the family, and it just follows their journey as they heal. The mother, to get away from the media circus that surrounds their family, moves them to Costa Rica with their mother-in-law, because he's been missing for 3 years. His mother never gave up looking for him. They created this Find Caleb Foundation. It was a whole thing. And now that he's been found, the internet, the world, the media wants to keep capitalizing on the story, find the happy ending. So they moved to Costa Rica to get away from all that and start over. And the family dynamics were just lovingly explored. They were complicated and they were difficult, but it was handled so nicely because, like, Caleb was kidnapped at 11, and it does not go into super heavy detail about what happened to him, but but like, he was kept captive for 3 years and, tortured and experienced horrible things. Like, that. But the way this was handled was just amazing. It was lovely. The tension at the end, there were a couple parts that were ick, but they were meant to make you feel that way. The exploration of not only what this experience did to Caleb and trying to be part of a normal family again after having experienced all this, and trying to be a kid again while all the people around you your age know nothing of what you've been through and don't even know how to deal with that. Like, it was just amazing. The mother, her exploration of, like, having worked for 3 years to try and find him and believing that he was alive this whole time, and now having him back and having to deal with the actual human of him rather than the idea of him. And, his father having to deal with that same issue, except his father thought he was dead. And his younger sister, she turns the age that he was throughout the course of the book when he was taken. And I don't know how to put into words how good this book was. It was interesting and engrossing and really deeply explored the mindset, the emotions of these characters. And there was also, taking them out of their typical home and putting them in Costa Rica and making those connections between exotic animals and the special care that, because they're at this, like, wildlife rescue as well, the special care that certain animals need. I can absolutely see myself reading this again and just taking notes because it was fantastic. I immediately bought one of her other books. It was only available in ebook form, so I bought that. And I am just a huge fan. I can see why she got, like, a grant to finish writing this. Just 5 stars. This might be one of my top 10 books of the year. And it's May. Like, I plan on reading at least 50 more books this year. But this one, this is going to stick with me. I couldn't stop thinking about it for days. And then I read Radiant Sin by Katie Robert. This is the 4th in the Dark Olympus series. This is a romance. And, it wasn't as good as the other ones, not gonna lie. Apollo is, like, the spy master, and his assistant, Cassandra, they have to pretend that they're dating to infiltrate this house party and, like, get information about these outsiders who are coming to Olympus. And it very much follows upon the events of the previous book, because these outsiders, like, were competing to be Ares. I don't think you can, like, start with this book in the series and have everything make sense. You need to start with Wicked Beauty or further back. I liked the house party aspect. It was kind of like a murder mystery, which was really interesting, and I think it probably could have been done better, but it was still fun. I liked our main characters, but I just had some issues with, like, their relationship, and I'm not a huge fan of, like, mutual pining, especially in, like, a boss employee thing where, like, he felt constricted because he was her employer, that he couldn't, like, hit on her, which, like, is great. That's super honorable, but also, like, you know what? I just don't care for that trope. And so that was a big part of this. The other part of this was Apollo is, like, the spy master, and yet he didn't seem very good at spying. Like, he didn't seem very sneaky or conniving or knowing a lot of information about the city. Like, it just didn't fit. I feel like the author wanted him to be a certain way as, like, an upstanding man, because this is, like, not a dark romance necessarily. and he's like not a bad person, and she wanted to show that, but also he's a spy master in a city of terrible people. See, that's the thing about the series. The deeper we get into it, Olympus is supposed to be this like cutthroat, terrible place, and in the first book you can definitely see that, with the stakes being high and Zeus wanting to like kidnap people or kill people. Like, the stakes are really high in the first book, and I feel like the stakes are really high in the third book as well, but there's just something, there was kind of a dip in this one, even though we were at this house party where people are getting murdered, and yet the stakes didn't really feel as high. And maybe that's because I mostly listened to this on audio instead of reading it physically like I did the other ones, but I just feel like this didn't hit the spot for me. The sex scenes were still good, the plot was still fun. I'm definitely gonna read the next one. I love Katie Robert, but it was a 4-star. I might bump it down to like a 3.75, rounded up to 4. And finally, I finished out May with another thriller called How I'll Kill You by Ren DeStefano. This was a knockout. I love this author, so I shouldn't be surprised, but this was not what I expected, but also exactly what I wanted. This is a story about 3 sisters who are serial killers, and they make a deal to go to a new city, and one of them falls in love, and then they murder their boyfriend. And then they move on to the next one, and it's the next sister's turn, and they take turns killing these boys. And this time, it is Sissy's turn. It is her first boyfriend, her first kill, and they are in this Arizona town picking out a man for her to fall in love with and then kill. It was very dark, very like matter-of-fact dark, you know? It was not like, it didn't like glory in the blood and guts of it, but it was very like, and then I dismembered him. And then I pulled out all his teeth with pliers. Like, just bananas. I think that actually makes it even better, that it's like more bananas to be so just matter-of-fact about these brutal things happening. It was super fun. There were twists that I didn't see coming. It definitely like got my heart racing, got me tearing up a bit. I really liked all of our main characters. I thought they were distinct. I thought they were interesting. I thought they were well built. And I think the romance was very interesting. Within the first 100 pages, I was kind of like, wow, this is really like over dramatic. Like, this girl is life or death about this man. Like, they were fated to be, and she's immediately in love with him. But then you think about like, these people have been murdering men and then moving on. So like, the unhingedness of her falling in love so fast kind of fits. It works, you know? And it was really good. It was great. I loved it. I really hope Ren DeStefano writes more thrillers, because this was so good. I gave it 5 stars. I thought the plot was solid. I liked the characters, and like, it kind of sits in a place of like talking about women as monsters or women as predators rather than prey, and I always love that. There was a phrase to sum up my reading this month, it would really be, I support women's rights, and more importantly, women's wrongs. That's my theme for the month, and it was great. A lot of 4 and 5 stars, and I hope that June will be just as good, but I don't know if anything can top this. We'll find out. So thanks for watching my May wrap up. Let me know if you've read any of these books, or if this has made you interested in reading any of them. And if you like this video, you could subscribe, you could click that like button, but really, you can do whatever you want. And I'll see you next time.